taxes. I don't know whose favorite topic that is, but not necessarily mine. It is time to prepare those taxes, and we have some tips to help here. So let's actually bring in Courtney Alev, a consumer financial advocate at Credit Karma. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's not necessarily everybody's favorite time of year. We know, of course, the deadline is not until mid-April, but is it too early to file your taxes right now?
That's right, Josh. We know that the tax deadline is still a couple months away, but it's going to be here before we know it. And so you ask, can we start thinking about it now? The answer is yes. It is not too early to start thinking about your taxes and making a plan to get them filed. But before you sit down to actually do your taxes, you want to make sure you get organized. And so those tax forms that you need are going to be arriving usually in January and February in the mail, sometimes into March. And a lot of financial institutions are now sending them over email. So if you're like me and you love a great organized email box, I'd recommend creating a 2022 tax documents folder so that when you do sit down to do those taxes, you have everything in one place.
I gotcha. So what are some of the, I guess, drawbacks? Are there any of doing these taxes early? Again, it is just January at this point. We're about to get into February and they're not due until mid-April. What are the drawbacks? What are the benefits to doing this early?
Absolutely. So the number one benefit of filing your taxes early is if you're one of the many Americans who's expecting a tax refund this year, the earlier you file, the earlier you can get that refund and get that money back in your pocket. And if you e-file with a DIY solution like TurboTax, it's likely you'll get that refund even faster. And then you can put it towards financial goals or other things you might need that money for. On the flip side, if you think you're going to owe money this year, there's still a benefit to filing early because you have more time to actually pay that tax bill. For example, if you file on February 1st and you find out that you owe a balance, you don't actually need to pay the IRS that balance due until April 18th. So those are two benefits of filing early. Another one that's a little less common, but we'd still like folks to know about, is there are tax refund scams where if a scammer has all of your personal information, it's possible they could actually file a tax refund for you and pocket that refund and create real problems when you go to file your own taxes because the IRS will only accept one refund per person. Again, not super common, but just something that we want folks to be aware of and another benefit for filing early. But with that all being said, you asked about drawbacks. There is one potential drawback to filing too early, and that's if you don't have all those tax forms already and you end up filing and then it turns out that you actually owe more money than you thought, you'll need to file an amendment to your tax return, basically an edit. Takes you a little bit more time, and then worst case scenario, if you end up actually owing more than you paid, you could potentially owe interest or penalties.
And if you're like me and you've done your taxes each and every year, but you're flighty and forgetful and have the memory of a goldfish, what exactly do you need to file your taxes? What needs to be right there in front of you?
Yeah, so whether you're doing your taxes yourself or you're having a professional do it for you, there's a number of things you're going to want to make sure that you have first. The first is any proof of identity for you as well as any of your family members. If you're filing jointly with a spouse or have dependents, you'll also want your social security card. And then you want your tax forms. So what forms are those? First, any income forms you might have. That could be a W-2 from your employer. It could be a 1099 from other sources of income. And then you'll also want forms for any potential deductions that you might have. So this could be mortgage interest that you paid, student loan interest that you paid. Those banks will generally send you tax forms, and it's important to keep a hold of those because they could end up being deducted from your taxes. And lastly, you want to make sure you have receipts for any contributions that you made that might be relevant to your tax situation. So this can include things like a IRA contribution, charitable contributions, or mileage logs if you own your own business.
Okay, so another big question, should you use an online program? There are so many of them. Should you go to an accountant? I've done both, and I'm not sure which is easier and which is harder to do.
Yeah, it's a great question that many Americans are wrestling with every tax season. The good news is there's so many options, both for do-it-yourself tools as well as professionals do it for you. And both are great. There's just different pros and cons, and it really depends on your own individual financial situation. So some of the benefits to filing on your own is that you can save money. It's usually very cheap, or you might be able to file for free, and then you might get that refund faster. On the other side, having a professional CPA do your taxes for you means that you can save time. And even though you're spending a bit more money, you have that peace of mind of knowing that someone is doing it for you. The good news is if you're a simple filer, so that might be someone who's young, has limited income streams, limited investments or assets, no dependents, it's very likely you can file your taxes on your own and oftentimes for free. So whatever you want to do, whether it's using a DIY solution or having a professional do it for you, make a plan now. So if you want to use a professional, it's not too early to check in and make sure that you can find someone who has availability for you and that you know what their deadline is to get all of those important tax forms we just chatted about to that CPA to make sure that they can file your taxes in time.
All right, last question for you is what is one thing that you think people don't know about filing your taxes that you want to make sure everyone out there does know?
The number one thing we'd recommend is that if you are in that large group of Americans expecting a tax refund this year is to make a plan now for that refund, even if it's not in your pocket yet. For a lot of Americans, the tax refund is the biggest extra paycheck or windfall of the year. And while it can be so tempting to have that burn a hole in your pocket and put it all towards fun stuff, it's a great opportunity to get a head start on your 2023 financial goals. So that could be anything from paying down debt that you accrued during the holiday season or putting it towards a goal such as a down payment or a college fund.
All right. Anything else that you do want to add before I let you go? This is a topic that everyone is obviously interested in because we are at that time of year. So what else can you tell us?
Yeah, the last thing I'd recommend is that folks are just aware of scams. So there's a lot of scams when it comes to taxes in the IRS, and this is, of course, the most popular season for it. So if you if you're receiving an email or a social media post or a call from someone pretending to be the IRS and asking you for personal information, it is most likely fraud. The IRS really only communicates with folks through the U.S. Postal Service, through snail mail. And so if you are getting suspicious emails or calls, they encourage you to report that and make sure you're not giving your personal information over to someone who could be a scammer.
All right, Courtney Alev, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I can imagine we're going to bother you on a weekly basis from now until April.
Perfect. Thank you so much.